Good evening to you. This isn't going well. The pound, I'm glad to say, is doing a little better, but the political crisis is intensifying. An utterly jaw-dropping poll has just dropped, giving the Labour Party a 33-point lead over the Tories, which seems to be the biggest for any party since the 1990s. Now, this is meant to be Liz Truss's honeymoon period, and I know it's only one poll, but asked how well she's doing, 15% said well, and 65% said badly. So what is the next move for the Conservative Party? These unfunded tax cuts the markets hate. Well, they're not going to change. Liz Truss made that clear in a series of most unfortunate radio interviews earlier today. And the people, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor Kwasi, responsible for what is happening to our currency and mortgage rates, well, they're not going to change either. The idea of Tory MPs launching some kind of coup against the Prime Minister just weeks into the job is a deranged fantasy. Fair enough, you may say, just like almost everything else in British public life right now. Good point, except this is a deranged fantasy which is also not going to happen. Nor do I think Truss is about to sack her Chancellor. His ideas are her ideas. His budget was her budget. Sacking him would be, in a slightly weird way, very close to sacking herself. Sacking her own programme for leadership, sacking her agenda in government. So, no change in policy, no change in direction, no change in personnel, and yet the polling and the market reactions remain hideous for the Tories. Fear is growing about mortgage rates, and as we learned today, the new Prime Minister is really very bad at making a case for her own policies. Asked direct, relevant and brutal questions by a succession of local radio hosts, Liz Truss stuttered, dodged, ignored, but most dangerously of all, she simply went silent. Now, there is almost nothing as unsettling in speech radio as unexpected silence. You see what I mean. Ministers say this is a crisis caused by market failures to understand what they're trying to do, in which case they have no alternative but to explain better. And today suggested they can't. Yikes! I dread to think what the Tory conference is going to be like. But there is one other part of this economic crisis which has not had nearly enough attention, because coming down the tracks next, unless ministers are even now changing course in their Whitehall offices, is a tight squeeze on public spending. The NHS, schools, local government, policing are expected to get no help with inflation from a Chancellor who today refused to say he would stick by his predecessor's promise to uprate benefits for the poorest by inflation. We've had one set of cuts, tax cuts, which haven't gone down well. Just wait for the next helping, the spending cuts. As soon as the Commons finally returns, Truss and Kwasi are going to have to sell all of that to Tory MPs who are already mutinous. So how will this end? Haven't a Scooby. But the situation at the top of politics is now very fragile. And some kind of sudden collapse is perfectly possible. I wouldn't even rule out an early general election, except, of course, there's that poll. Now then, one specific problem we need to sort out. You'll have heard that energy bills are going to be capped for 2 years at £2,500. It was one of the things that Liz Truss kept saying in those unfortunate radio interviews. But it's not quite true.